Welcome to Baldly Go, the officially unofficial podcast for all the Star Trek. I'm Jim.
I'm A.Ron.
And today we're talking Season 2, Episode 3 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. I think there's 5 tomorrows in there.
So many.
Yeah, one for every day of the week. And Shakespeare couldn't be bothered with the weekend.
I was going to say one for every timeline that every episode of Star Trek spawns.
Apparently, yeah.
You know, we got a lot.
A.Ron, I think everybody, even me, even somebody who is not familiar with Shakespeare in even the most fundamental ways, is familiar with this quote from Macbeth. How'd you find this episode, I guess?
I actually really like this episode. There are a couple things you could accuse it of. Being low budget and damn near a bottle episode. You just kind of take your stars, you put them in contemporary clothes, you unleash them on modern day Toronto. And,
I thought it was New York.
So did James T. Kirk.
Yeah.
Which I thought was cute. I thought that was a nice little kind of lampshading moment. But like, I don't know. There's a lot of this episode, like a lot of the transitions, like particularly the transition where La'an and Jim Kirk are going to visit Pella in Vermont. That's like, this is exactly the aesthetic of a Hallmark Christmas special. Like, this is the kind of like, and it's funny because like, I just realized a couple of days before, I can't remember if it's like me or our social media manager or our producer were talking about like, where is this show shot? And I looked it up and it's like, oh, it's a CBS studio in Ontario. And I'm like, Star Trek's fucking filmed in Ontario? The Ohio of Canada? But
why not?
I mean, that's the thing. It's like Ontario's a weird place because it is kind of, I think it's kind of like the Ohio of Canada, but it also contains their largest city. It's like if Ohio contained New York City. Whoa. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking down, by the way. I live in the Ohio of America, aka Ohio, and I love it. So like, I've been to Ontario many times, always had a great time. But It is wild to see people just walking around in Toronto, and especially since I thought as it was happening that like, oh, they're going to try to pass this off as Times Square. No, they fucking said, nah, it's fucking Toronto. What of it?
Yeah, no, it was a pretty good joke with the New York stuff.
Other than that, La'an Noonien Singh is one of my favorite characters. I like them from the pilot. I'm like, oh, this looks like Drummer from The Expanse, and she's probably genetically modified, and she's going to be a badass, and she's a security officer. I love it. I love it. I love it. And giving her, is this like her first kind of? So I mean, I definitely, they've given her things to do in previous episodes and seasons, but she was AWOL for like the last 2 episodes of last season, and yeah, I really liked it. I always love a good time travel plot. I think it's a smart retcon because if you know anything about Khan and the original series, you know that he ruled 25% of the land area and population of Earth between 1992 and 1998. Clearly something that did not happen in our timeline, and the idea that Romulans have been fucking trying to pervert our timeline for like this Romulan age has been stuck here since 1992. I thought that's I don't know, I think that stuff is kind of clever and funny in the same way that like the Trials and Tribulations episodes where they kind of like go back and this is just so much better than the usual kind of go back in time episode in terms of like, you know, how they solved it, in terms of its internal like continuity that didn't feel like it was stretching my suspension of disbelief. But yeah, and yeah, Star Trek's always had like cheap ways to do weird episodes. Like, I don't know how many fucking golf courses in La Brea I saw passed off as planets in Star Trek The Next Generation, and you know, just random canyons in Southern California passed off as planet. It's like, it's always been part of Star Wars Trek's DNA, so why not Toronto? What did you think though, Jim?
Sure. Yeah, I'm with you. I like this episode a lot. I think having the focus on La'an was kind of exciting because I don't really feel like I've gotten a great idea of her character yet, or maybe I just forgot it from season 1. I'm not sure. But this was a really well-written episode all around. I think, like, yeah, everything you said about the way that they solve the time travel problems and things like that was interesting. But I think the bigger triumph of this episode is the character beats with Lon. Giving her essentially a decision to wipe away all that stuff, right? Her Scarlet Letter or whatever. I think is a smart one, and she comes down on the side that we would kind of, I guess, a personal sacrifice on her part. So I don't know. I felt like it was really interesting what they were doing with her character, and boy, just the isolation that she feels really came into focus this episode. Because I never quite, I guess, understood, and I guess I still haven't really seen it, because we've always been with her crew, and her crew is not like super prejudiced against her. Right. So I still haven't really seen what she's going through, but now I understand what she feels about it. So I think it was super useful for her character.
Yeah, I thought it's such a great, and just a lot of clever writing. There's a lot of clever character beats. Like, they introduced the concept last episode of how alienating being this, the modified legacy growing up, and how the kind of current Federation abhors that kind of thing, and the prejudice she's faced, and getting to a timeline. They played a little bit of this with 7 of 9 last year too. Escaping to a timeline where that weight is just off you. Like, no one knows who the hell Noonien Singh is, and no one has ever heard of the word Khan, and there's no infamy, and like someone just kind of making fun of your last name just in like, it's kind of funny and distinctive, like Kirk does, and her realization, like, oh my god, he doesn't know. Like, I feel like that's got to be relatable for a lot of people, like, what if I could escape to a place where, like, people didn't scrutinize me because of, what I look like, or how I'm presenting to the world, or what they think they know about me based on my name or my accent, or yeah, and it seemed like it was pretty powerful.
It always makes me wonder why she doesn't just change her name, because that's definitely a thing, but it's not like she has some birthmark that marks her as a Khan.
Might be just pride, because there is some kind of legacy, and like, do you want to turn your back on that just because people are assholes?
Sure.
I come from German American immigrants, and life was kind of hell for an early 20th century because Germany was like the arch villain of all the plot lines. And like, I know a couple of Hubbards who have anglicized their last name, and my family had not, and I always wondered, like, well, why when they were like burning down German speaking newspapers and like shutting down German speaking schools and stuff, like, what caused my great grandparent and my grandparent to be like, what, fuck you, we're keeping this name. Hopefully it's not because they're Nazi sympathizers. But I'd like to think it's because they, or they're like die hard for the Kaiser. I'd like to think it's because they're just like, fuck, no, we didn't change who we were because these assholes across the continent started, like, fuck that. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of sympathize with keeping the infamous name. Sure. Can I issue a public apology?
Oh no. Yeah.
I like a sincere public apology to Paul Wesley. For saying that I thought you were a bad James T. Kirk, because maybe it's just a sample size. I thought I really saw the Kirk shine through. Yeah. And maybe I dismissed him because, like, I mostly know of him as like the star of the Vampire Diaries, which is the CW lurid Riverdale-esque, take off Twilight. But I thought that there was, I don't know, there's a little twinkle in his eye that he got in this episode. And I don't know, see the half seducing La'an also, maybe that was the big Kirk tell. But like, he's got a pretty good handle. I could see him in a couple of years being a mighty fine Captain Kirk if we're lucky enough that the show stays good for that long.
Yeah, I like the edge that there is to that character. He's really bringing like a sort of, good guy scoundrel vibe. I like Han Solo, right? Roguish kind of thing. The
chaotic good, alignment
for sure
is there. Do you know how old this guy is? How old would you think James T. Kirk is in this timeline? Lieutenant Kirk.
Oh yeah, no, this is a problem. 23.
How old do you think
he's
the actor playing? playing him is?
Let's go with 27.
He's 40 years old, Jim.
Get out of here. He's not my age. No, I don't believe it.
Christina Chong, who plays Laan Noonien Singh, guess how old she is?
163.
You've got it. She's actually a Lanthian.
I don't know.
She's 39 years. She'll be 40 this year.
It's shameful. It's shameful what they do.
I don't know what they're doing up in Canada. I don't know if it's the fucking maple
genetic
syrup.
manipulation, obviously.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's who knew. Who knew that Canada would be rocking the cold fusion, the merciless genetically modified warlords. Blame Canada. Like for the eugenics wars and for almost losing the 21st century. Turns out, didn't know. Dark horse candidate for destroyer of humanity, Canada. Thought
Blame
it was going to
Canada. Almost as
United
deep a cut as
States.
the title of this episode.
Blame exactly. Yeah. I mean, they stole. They came out of nowhere. Took the brass ring from the United States, Russia, China, North Korea. Nope, we're going to do it. So good on you. I wonder if it feels good as a Canadian to see like Toronto playing such a big part in future global affairs, or does it feel bad because it seems like it's going to be an infamous role?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not the Canadians' fault that they got blown up.
True.
Not the Torontians? I don't know what you call
that they were targeted by the Romulans to suppress our society's natural development.
They were going along pretty nicely before that. I don't know.
It feels pretty good as an Earther to know that the Romulans are using 30 years of chronological warfare to try to keep us back, and we just fuck them. Us monkeys on this rock are undefeated, cannot be stopped. We're going to get off. We're going to explore the stars. We're going to run this whole shit from San Francisco, California, the whole galaxy. You can't stop us. Can't stop. You wish you could, but you can't. Borg can't. Romulans can't. Nobody can.
Mm-hmm. All right, maybe we should get into the recap.
Yeah.
All right, let's start off with Lon going around the ship, doing her duties, giving bad news to people. I guess that's what she does. And then she works out her frustrations on M'Benga during their sparring session. He tries to help her work through some of her anger, her feelings here, but she's not willing to talk about it. I like this note where Spock has had a noise complaint filed against him for his lute playing. Pretty good.
Yeah, he'll endeavor to be less and exuberant about it. I thought it was neat that like we don't often think about the security personnel and their primary role, what they probably spend 95% of their time, which is just being a referee, like the you know, a lot of security police forces, you know, and a lot of times we see him and it's like Worf's planning security for a delegation and an important summit that the Enterprise is hosting, but 95% of is probably, you know, finding out what teenagers stole what supply from what department, personal beefs, domestic disputes, things like that. And I like getting just a little slice of life of that, and had no idea that they were actually setting up plot points, because I don't know, I continue to like Pella, and I like how they integrated her into the plot line. And you see her this episode really rewards multiple watches, because you kind of get everything on the first watch through, but the idea that like I don't think Pella is stealing this stuff necessarily. She just squirreled it away through thousands of years of living.
Yeah, is she moving her stuff onto the Enterprise? Is that what's happening here?
I think that's what it is. And they're like going through her, and they're like, where are the receipts for this? It looks like it's all stolen from a place called the Archaeology Department, which we know is the name of her shady pawn shop in the 21st century Vermont region. It is good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's enjoyable.
I like how she's like, I still maintain this bunker in Vermont, just in case this whole Romany socialist utopian thing turns out to be a fad. Like, she's got plans. This isn't the first civilization she's seen.
Makes sense for somebody who's been around humans for thousands of years.
Yeah, but also like, it's also kind of funny that I feel like they are throwing some modern critiques of Star Trek into the writing, like the idea that the Federation is this kind of socialist utopia, but it is unmistakably an empire. You know, like there's a lot of Deep Space Nine deals with like that famous root beer speech that Quark gives to Garrick, you know, about they do a velvet glove and they're pretty nice about it, but nah, they really want to bring the rest of the galaxy to their heel, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it just happens to be that this particular heel is not as sharp as some others, you know?
Right, but your society is definitely going to be changed and altered by joining the Federation. Like, there's no way you're going to get to maintain all your cultural distinctiveness, and it's by hook and crook is going to be melted away.
For sure. That we find that Pellier is the new engineer here, which a little disappointing to me, given my feelings about the particular character. But what are you going to do?
I wish I could lay odds on whether you'll fall in love with her by the end of the season. Because I kind of think she's a lot. She's a lot.
Yeah, strong brew. It's not to my flavor, but what are you going to do? Can't like them all. Anyway, somebody stumbles in the hall with a shotgun wound and asks for help. Sorry, not shotgun, gunshot. I don't know if it's a shotgun.
I was like, wow, is that they actually specifically said it was? I thought, yeah.
Nope. It's just a gunshot. Asked for her help with an attack that happened in the past. He gives her a device and tells her to get to the bridge. And when she gets to the bridge, Pike isn't the captain. James Kirk is.
Yeah.
The old switcheroo. Exactly what
happened. So does this mean that Christopher Pike in this timeline, did he never exist, or is he just a scarred up husk in a wheelchair way sooner?
It's a good question. We never really get a hint as to what happens to Pike in this timeline, so
pretty sweet seeing Kirk sitting in the chair though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not done with Pike. I like Pike a lot, but it's still pretty sweet seeing Kirk sitting in his spot. Yeah,
I like that this show has kind of turned into the Pike/Kirk show, because I definitely miss Kirk, even though I like Pike a lot.
It kind of has to, although it feels like they're accelerating. Like, I think they wrote Sam Kirk in as kind of like that little, like, hey, don't forget, we're keeping a seat warm for somebody here. But like, it seems like they really were pleased with what they got out of their Paul Wesley, James Kirk, and their because like, I kept on feeling as he becomes more and more part of the plot, and it seems like he's destined to be part of it going forward, that like that makes Sam less and less important.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I'm certainly paying less thought to him.
Have we even? When's the last time we've seen him? I mean, he's being referenced all the time in this episode, but
yeah, it's been a while.
Do you think that there will be some bleed over attraction from Kirk to Sam, from Jim to Sam, from La'an?
I hadn't considered it. I don't know. It'd probably be a more appropriate relationship, but I don't know. I'm super curious to see what they do with the events.
How is it inappropriate?
He's
both lieutenants.
A captain. I don't know.
Wait. Kirk is not captain. He's a
Kirk
lieutenant.
Was absolutely a captain of that other ship.
What
was the name of it?
Yeah, but this Kirk is dead. I'm talking about back in our prime timeline.
Yeah, Kirk is a captain of whatever ship he came from that got blown up last season.
I thought so too, but when La'an calls him at the end of the episode, it says on the Chiron underneath him, and he says, "This is Lieutenant Kirk. Go ahead." I don't think he's a captain. He might have been like
really
field promoted as a captain or acting captain, but like they definitely is that a full on retcon?
Oh, I don't know, because he was definitely captaining a ship last season. Like when they meet him, he is the captain of that ship, right?
Now, again, I wasn't doing it, but like the thing about podcasting that changes the way I watch shows is I watch it many times and I talk about it and I get feedback on it. So maybe I was a little hazy, but like I thought that he was just a very young, newly minted captain. This episode is definitely, maybe it's because a lot of people thought that, but they definitely are clarifying at the end that he's a lieutenant at this point.
Huh, okay.
So,
well, yeah, maybe he got busted down for all his shenanigans last
that is also
episode.
A possibility. He got court-martialed.
I mean, he saved him, but also bent some rules, as Kirk does. I don't know. We'll see if she kind of transfers that affection over to Sam. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where they're going with that. I did like it, though. The very end of this episode is very good.
Yeah.
She calls him up and sort of, there is a spark there, too. It's not like nothing existed. He invites her for a drink next time they're at a starbase together.
But is that just Kirk, like...
Sure.
The sparks are just flying off him like he's grinding metal, and he's just like, fuck it, yeah. If we ever in starbase, if we're ever in starbase, if we're ever in star. Does he say that like 17 times a day?
Yeah, in every timeline, I assume.
Yeah, anytime he finds someone remotely sexually attractive, which is always, he's just like, hey, next time we're in starbase, we should get a few drinks. That's just his move.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, knowing what James T. Kirk is like, definitely cheapens what Lon has forged with him over the course of this episode. But I don't know. I don't know if you're an experienced enough shipper to know the joy of harnessing an invertebrate bad boy, like bending him to your will and making him like you're like, oh, he actually sees you as a special. Is this a Vampire Diaries thing?
Fuck me, I assume. Yeah. So the only reason I know about the Vampire Diaries is one of my favorite YouTubers made a 2.5 hour
Jesus
epic dissertation about the series.
And you watched it?
Yes, I did. Did I not? They're one of my favorite YouTubers, Jenny and Nicholson.
All right.
There's a whole China Beach DVD saga to it. It's highly recommended. But I think that's definitely, if you have a guy who's a bad boy and you are a person who can settle that person down, that's one of the tropiest tropes of tropey love affairs. You're going to be the one.
Yeah, it's every romance novel ever written, right?
I did wonder as it's going down, like, how does this affect the Space Seed episode of the original series when Khan shows up? Like, Khan shows up, he's like, oh yeah, I was actually friends with your great great granddaughter. Yeah,
I mean, they can always retcon this with a different timeline, right? It can always be like, this is the Calvin and Hobbes timeline.
Yeah, with the temporal police, it's like they've got a ready-made excuse for like, oh, well, there's a little timeline drift because there's a little crisis here, but we nipped and tucked it, and it's all back. It's all battened down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. I don't know. We'll see what they do with it. Spock is another outlier in this timeline. He actually contacts them from his ship, the Chiro. It's really hard to figure out what they're saying without subtitles because so many of these things are just alien words and pronounced by aliens, and it's very strange. Anyway, he asks for their help. Despite the dire situation, Kirk refuses to help, which, is kind of delicious given how close they are, in the original series and all that. And he's like, turning down Spock, huh?
Right. Yeah, can't help you. And it sounds like the Vulcans are in a similar spot that they were in the JJ timeline, where their war between the Romulans is going to lose them everything, including their home planet.
Yeah, gonna blow it up.
It's a real shithole timeline, Jim.
Yeah, for sure.
I stuttered because I'm like, that felt so weird to say that in the context of Star Trek,
Yeah. I'm a doctor, not a shithole timeline, Jim. Lon tells Kirk what's going on and asks him to help stop the attack. Kirk demands a hand over the device for study, but when he tries to grab it, the button is accidentally pressed and they are transported to another time and stuck there.
The green button turns red and is not going to let them go back until presumably they heal the timeline.
I want to know what happened to their badges. It's not a comms badge in this timeline, but
I think they call it an insignia.
Their insignia is really terrible in the new timeline.
Like, is it supposed to
look
look
gold?
evil?
It's just like it's just a faceted. It's like a piece of flat faceted plastic. Instead of being an actual shape, it just has like facets that sort of imply a shape.
Well, it's probably really 3D printed 16 hours before it was filmed. So This is other than the start and end of this episode. This was a pretty inexpensive episode to film. I'm thinking.
Sand it, paint it, get it on screen. Come on.
Yep.
Don't have time for this.
High def must make that a bitch. Because man, when you go back and watch like TNG episodes and you see like Crusher using a medical implement that's clearly hand carved by wood and spray painted silver, it's like, boy, howdy. Standard definition really hit a lot of sins. They can't really half-ass it with 4K.
No, you can't. Same with makeup.
True.
We find out there's no Starfleet in this timeline. It's the United Earth Fleet. So I don't know exactly what happened. I forget. I think they say something about that later in the episode as to what happened, but
the visual gag of them being like in Toronto and him trying to say that it's clearly early in the mid 21st century Earth, New York. I thought it's funny because like when the scene started, sometimes because we're watching the screeners, and sometimes screeners will have like unfinished special effects and shots and whatnot. And I, for like 3 seconds, was thinking, oh, this is clearly downtown Toronto that they haven't dressed digitally yet. Because it's clear to me how you can just extend this building up and, a couple more billboards here and tweak the color correction a little bit, and voila, you would have Times Square. And then when Kirk is starting to say active, it's just like, I'm like, that I thought it was just really funny. It's a really funny gag when La'an's like, are you fucking kidding me? Look all around. All the signs say Toronto. Like, come on, what's happening here? I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, with the Toronto center there. Pretty silly. So they're in Toronto. It's cold. And they decide they need to go get some warmer clothes. So some minor shenanigans involving matching outfits and half-naked Kirk happen, and then they sneak out of the store without paying. Classic Kirk taking his shirt off. Got to get at least some of that in there.
Sparks flying. That's they frame this poor woman shopper. It's a great it's a great gag, but yeah. Like, I don't think have we ever seen Federation officers just shoplift shit? They usually have great pains, like Kirk's got to go to a pawn shop and sell his antique spectacles, or I don't know, Cisco's got to make a pot of gumbo on the corner to get bus fare, but they just fucking steal it. 5-figure discount.
Yeah, they do. That's got to change the timeline in some way, right?
Well, yeah, it's like I don't know. Star Trek 4, they give away the formula to transparent aluminum years, perhaps decades before it's invented. So minor change to the timeline, apparently. They
both have similar taste in clothing.
I thought that was really funny. They both came out with like the Jason Bourne gray man outfit, and Kirk goes and changes it up for slightly different leather jacket.
He's never been to Earth in this timeline, which I thought was interesting. He's born on a ship, spends most of his life on moon bases, because I guess the Earth is just completely fucked up. Like he talks about in the next scene, he'll talk about how the Earth has just like ash clouds that never part.
That won't dissipate for thousands of years. Like it's just been a radiated nuclear wasteland.
It seems like Earth couldn't get their shit together before the worst effects of climate change.
It is pretty cute that he was born on board the USS Iowa.
Sure, considering where he's born on Earth.
Almost too cute, but I'll allow it. There is one more too cute thing, and I wouldn't, but I'm allowing the one USS Iowa. Like, why the fuck would that be the case? Why would Time's Arrow bend so hard to make his birthplace Iowa?
I don't know. He's got corn in his blood. He wouldn't be Kirk without that.
Why would you be born in the Nebraska of United States, Iowa? If and then why would the timeline see it so important to make sure you're born on a USS Iowa to keep that consistent? But it's funny.
It is. Another funny thing, they need some money, so Kirk goes and plays chess in the park for cash, just mopping the floor with people. And I was thinking it, and they actually do say it, but like when you've played 3D chess, 2D chess is probably like checkers to him. So yeah, it makes sense that he'd be good at it.
I was actually, when it was happening, I'm like, are they going to establish that he's genetically modified, that he's got like the Khan genes, and they would maybe have something in common? Because like, it's cute that like like 4D chess is so much more advanced that, you know, playing 2D chess is like playing checkers. But man, I don't know. Like, how is he so much smarter than I you know, these are probably not the top 10 chess players in the world, but like they're also they're professional street hustlers, chess hustlers. I don't know. It's like is and because the thing is, like, Kirk isn't like a master chess player too. He just kind of like fucked around and played with his first officer. I kind of was hoping that he would be genetically modified, but I don't know. I guess it's a cute idea to hustle a bunch of kids playing checkers, essentially.
The game has changed, man. I mean, you take, I don't know, LeBron James, and you put him up against some shorts wearing dude from the 1920s.
Sure.
He's going to kick his ass all day, every day. There's nothing to do. The dude's going up for a fucking sky hook, and LeBron's going to dunk 8 times on him in the same amount of time. So
yeah. And I guess that's true. You just can't compete. And there's some kind of symposium, some kind of public debate that had a whole bunch of pop culture scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he's the one I recognize. But they were kind of talking about, like, you know, human evolution, and someone made the point about that like, we probably teach math wrong and we start way too late. Like, if babies were exposed to mathematical concept and logical constructs like the same time they were to like exposed to just like language expression and like, you know, things like that you know, you could have humans we wouldn't be any smarter, but just because we taught it better and started early, you could have, you know, humans that were fluent in physics and like quantum physics in like their junior high and high school years. And like, what would that do to society? Maybe there is something if you expose kids like 4-dimensional chess, and it's like, you know, that it does make their brains better and smarter in that certain way, because, you know, so I don't know, maybe it does track.
Yeah, I mean, humans physically haven't evolved much in like 100 years. 200 years, I think, is like 160 something years.
But that's if you take it even the longer term, like, you know, the fact that we're not really any smarter than humans were 100,000 years ago, but like, we're splitting the atom and they shit in caves, right? Like, it's knowledge is a huge leg up in the game. Yeah, so maybe the 4D chess is the answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked it.
And it was fun. It was super fun idea that Kirk would just hustle his way towards a nut, you know?
Yeah, like, what other immediately leverageable skills would any of them have, right?
Do you know what I actually said out loud?
Oh, no. What?
OnlyFans. Look at these attractive people. Get yourself a $45 webcam and start getting...
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That might have been a line too far for me. If Kirk just starts OnlyFans.
Yeah. It's like, it has to be a social media influencer. I think it would take a longer time too.
Yeah, the startup costs are also there. They'd have to go to Best Buy, steal a webcam, and a laptop, and yeah, it'd take a while. Anyway, they try and figure out what they're doing here while eating hot dogs and admiring the sunset. Kirk goes back for seconds on the hot dogs.
Well, it's not just the sunset too. It's the sailing ship. Like, I think you're supposed to, you know, like, this is supposed to resonate. Like, you can see him being wistful, that like he has been forced to be a blunt instrument in war, and what he really wants to be is an explorer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then you know,
it's going to be appealed to later, I think.
And he offers her, he's like, hey, you don't skip a good hot dog when you got your hands on it. The subtext with Kirk, of course, is always his penis. He's offering that to her, and she's not ready to accept it. But by the end of the episode,
so he eats it himself.
Which, well,
yeah.
Why? What are you going to do? Let it go to waste?
Right? It goes back for seconds.
Go back for seconds. Kirk loves him some him.
Oh yeah, he's nothing if not vain. I mean, he gets high on his own supply for sure. Anyway, Lon can't sleep that night and decides to watch Kirk sleep for a while. Seems like she wants to wake him and say something, but decides against it. Kirk notices, though. You rarely see this.
Yeah.
You rarely see officers sleeping on these type of emergency away missions. But it makes sense, right? Yeah, like usually there's such a focus on we have to figure this thing out, and especially when potentially the fate of everything and everyone they know being wiped away in a timeline shift, you'd think they'd be so concerned about it that maybe they could stay up for 24, 48 hours trying to figure this thing out, at least figure out what they need to do and when it's going to happen. But here, casual. Just, let's knock off early,
I think it's actually a sign of growth as their storytelling from like Disco and Picard that they are showing, like using the downtime to kind of like tell a story of, La'an's essential loneliness and how she doesn't have a connection, but she does feel a connection to this guy for like maybe the first time. And she wants to explore it, but also like, what the hell am I going to like jump this guy's bones from another timeline that's the brother of my crew? You can see that like she's like, this is not appropriate for a Starfleet officer. And I really like the touch of Kirk being aware that there is like this thing between them too, because of course he is.
To the point where they almost don't need the romantic angle here. It serves as an easy way to tell that they're forming a connection, but like you almost don't need that, because what she's really about here is isolation from everyone, right? It's not that, I've been missing out on romantic entanglements. It's more, everyone is prejudiced against me. I can't just be a person with anybody. And here I am with James T. Kirk, and I'm able to.
I was a little surprised that they actually went the romance angle at all. Because like La'an seems like the type of person who could be like non-binary, agender, ace. Like I didn't assume that like, oh wow, she's thrown with Kirk and she's gonna have the hots for him. It's like I was actually mildly surprised when she reacted to his torso and the clothes shop. It's like, oh, this okay, interesting. But I don't know. Like I said, it's human stories, and it's okay for humans to dehuman things, I think. Controversy.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Okay, the next day, Lon wants to get down to business by trying to remember the history that they know. Kirk's taking all of this less seriously because if they do succeed, his entire timeline is wiped out. And she appeals to Kirk's sense of exploration to get his cooperation. And as they do, just when they're like coming to a point of decision, the plot makes a decision for them. There's an attack.
And she realizes that get to the bridge meant a whole different thing because they've targeted this bridge to explode. I like the angle of like Kirk, who is not from an enlightened Federation culture, states like the selfish thing, right? Why the hell would I help you destroy my timeline? And I think her using this, like his longing to be an explorer, and it doesn't help the fact that like she alludes to the fact that he's alive and his brother is alive in their timeline. And I kind of wish that he had been a little bit more antagonistic and kind of like quizzed her about it, but like that'd be a futile effort because I'm sure the details for Sam are completely different in this timeline. But I thought it's interesting that like one part of the team wasn't 100% onto it, because why would they be? Like why would I be down for destroying my timeline? It might suck, but it's the one I know, all my people are there.
And I like the way that she tries to smooth out that wrinkle, is just like appealing to his sense of exploration, because he is an explorer. I don't know how much Lon would know about this guy. James T. Kirk because they've really only just met him in their timeline. But
she does serve with his brother.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think it kind of makes sense. And at first I was like, what the hell? Why doesn't she know him? And then I remember because she was absent the episode that Kirk showed up because she was escorting Kara the Explorer from the Expanse back to her refugee colony. So like that all kind of tracks. Yeah. And it's also funny that like this incident that happens, essentially the way he describes the universe that he lives in 23rd century, it sounds so much like the Expanse universe. Like, oh yeah, we don't have Earth, but we've got Ganymede and Io and like he's naming all the cool places in the Expanse, which is
all the places where human life might be able to eke out an existence.
Yeah. Is it time for us to make an earnest plea for Star Trek fans to watch the Expanse if they haven't already? Like, I can't imagine there's a self-respecting Star Wars fan that hasn't watched the Expanse. But if you're like really digging Star Trek and you want to see like a really well done kind of dystopian take on a plausible scientific 23rd century humanity, I cannot recommend The Expanse enough. I was late to that show because of the sci-fi of it all. You know, like I had several people
of it all. Yep.
The Sci-Fi Channel, the SIFI, the SYFY of it all. But that show is really amazing, and and if you're looking for a podcast companion, we got pretty solid coverage of at least the second half of The Expanse. Because again, I slept on it for the first 3 seasons, but it's a great show. You should check it out.
It sure is. Then Lon and Kirk go to the site of the explosion and find the destroyed bridge. They both seem to remember this attack, so it's not when things changed, but Lon notices that the charring on the bridge, on the shrapnel or whatever, looks like technology that hasn't been invented yet, and they decide to follow this thread.
Yeah, it sounds like a pre-version of photon torpedo, a photonic bomb.
Was it photonic?
They did say photonic. I rewound it a couple times.
Impossible to tell. I wrote down it's a platonic bomb because I thought it was funny.
That's what Kirk set off in Lon's pants. You know, they wanted to have a platonic relationship, but the Kirk of it all was just too much.
Just exploded that platonic bridge. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering because they mentioned it's like, wow, it's the world's largest bridge. It just got completed. Where the fuck would you build a bridge over Lake Ontario? What do you connect it to? Like I was looking and like, there's not a lot of like places that seem like it logically would make sense.
Where exactly is Toronto? Is that up by Detroit? Like right across?
No, kinda, but it's on Lake Ontario. But
I would assume,
but it's not like, again, it's like there's a couple of cities you could connect it to, but it's like, I don't know, why would you? Maybe, and that's the other thing. I guess this is like, you're supposed to understand this is like 10, 15, 20 years into Canada's future. This is like 2040, 2050. So maybe there's been an economic, I forget the place I was looking. There is a city across the Ontario, but it seems like a very small
Gary,
small city.
Indiana. Just connect a bridge right to Gary.
Niagara.
Okay.
Buffalo. Yeah. Does that even connect? I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassing myself in my knowledge of U.S. history, U.S. geography, Canadian geography, North American geography. Failing.
So they're going to follow this thing. They meet this photographer as well. They asked to see her pictures in order to get a look at this charring. So we'll meet her again here in a bit. Kirk steals a car with very little trouble, but the driving isn't quite as easy. They drive it through traffic and they have to give chase when the evidence van takes an unexpected turn. I want to know why a Kirk who has never been to Earth can drive a car.
Dude, not just any car, a rear-wheel drive American muscle car through the rain or the snow-slushed streets of Toronto. No fucking shot.
Yeah, especially when he's power sliding around. He's driving it like a professional driver. I didn't buy it. It would have been funnier if he couldn't drive it well.
Yes, like they make a couple of jokes about how he just really wants to be in charge because he's kind of like the man, and you know he's Star Trek 60s is still a little sexist in that way. And I thought it'd be funny for him just to fall on his face. Or here's another idea: cut this whole sequence. Not every Star Trek episode needs to be an hour and 1 minute long with credits. Like you could just have a 45-minute episode without this kind of dumb car chase.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like some of this stuff, but yeah.
How did you feel about Kirk Vulcan neck pinching somebody? Because this
when he
kind of rocked my Star Trek
yet,
fans' mind.
Or I guess not even doesn't know Spock yet. He doesn't know Spock at all.
But he went.
And they don't have the same relationship with the Vulcans. So
and he spent 6 months in a Nebulan prison, and he learned it. But I always thought there was a knowledge of nerve clusters, but also a hand strength component that like a Vulcan can do it, since they're like, I think canonically twice as strong as a human. Data can do it because Data has neck pinch people because he's got the fucking cyborg grip or android grip. Probably Worf could pull it off, but like a baseline human. I don't know. You could pop a dude's neck like that. Maybe.
I'm trying to think. I know I've seen it multiple times in Star Trek, and not from Spock, from other characters. Did
McCoy do it when he was possessed by Spock's spirit? And he might.
Maybe.
I kind of think he might have done it in Star Trek 3, which again,
I'm almost certain.
If that's the case, then I would draw all exception. But I really thought that the Vulcan hand strength was a essential part. Like otherwise, why wouldn't Spock teach everyone that? You know.
Sure. Yeah, it's useful. I'm almost certain that this is not the first time they've done this.
Vulcan, Lear, and then neck pinching 101 on the Enterprise.
Yeah, could start a commune with all that skill.
What were the things you liked about it? Because I did like a few things about the scene other than the ridiculous kind of setup. And the thing is like, okay, one more thing. You mentioned he drives like a professional kart. I thought that they might actually throw a line in like, yeah, I've never been to Earth, but I race ice dune buggies on fucking the moon of Titan or something that would give him the like, you know, the why he would do this sick drift in the middle of traffic. But nope, he just is a dumbass that has a preternatural snow driving skills. Yeah. Anyway, what are the things you liked about the scene?
Some of the jokes, and I guess them just bonding. Like her teasing him about his middle name, Tiberius, the least discreet middle name.
That's really funny.
All that stuff I thought was good. Like it's not the car driving that I liked, I guess. It's more like everything that's happening between the lines here.
I liked it too. I like the, you know, discretion's my middle name. Wait, isn't your name Tiberius? That's like the least discreet name ever, and how it led to Sam and the George of it all, which then brings him to make fun of her last name, which leads her to realize, oh my God, he doesn't. And it's a great, I all the stuff that up until they do the needle drop. And they have this like driving rock music, and Kirk is fishtailing. It's like that. I didn't need those 30 to 60 seconds, but yeah, you're right. They had some solid goofs and some solid character development in between all that.
Yeah, I forget what the context is, but before they get into the car, he's talking about being able to make soup in a toilet. Oh, it's it was like for the neck pinch thing. Yeah, like I can do the neck pinch. I can also make soup in a toilet.
I can make Vulcan soup, toilet Vulcan soup.
Pretty good.
Oh. Also,
I could also make soup in a toilet, Kirk.
Anyone can really just open up. It's like just eating it's the trick. I mean, arguably every time you use a toilet, you're making soup.
Some might say.
So they mentioned that they spent 6 months in a Denebulan prison. Do you recognize the species?
No.
I didn't either, but if you're a Star Trek Enterprise fan, you probably do, because that's the species of, I guess, fan favorite Dr. Phlox.
Phlox? All right.
You know, they had a chief medical officer who was an alien. He could puff his face out, and he had a super long tongue and whatnot. I don't know. I watched
like 2 episodes of that show.
Yeah, like half of the first season of Enterprise, but they're throwing you, it's an Enterprise continuity bone.
Yeah. anything post season 2 of Voyager, my knowledge is very scant.
Pretty spotty until we get to Picard, essentially.
Or the reboots of the movies a little bit, but like
yeah.
So they get caught by the cops. A photographer starts hassling the police, so they let him go. And the photographer was also following the van, so they decide to team up. She claims that the bombing was a false flag to distract them from the real threat, aliens. Kirk and Lon claim to have been abducted, and Kirk asks if she's heard about platonic bombs. She says, yeah, they've been going off my whole life. No, I don't like this scene. I think sometimes when they try to do very modern things in Star Trek, it works, and sometimes it doesn't. And this, for me, is where it doesn't work. Why would the cops let them go here? This was... nothing was being done that was wrong here. Nothing. They were driving like maniacs through the snow-covered streets of Toronto without licenses. They should be arrested.
I think, first of all, I agree with you. I didn't like this scene very much either, but I'm going to play a devil's advocate, which is, when you really think about it, what did Kirk do wrong? He lost control of his vehicle and drove through a plaza and almost hurt someone, but he didn't. They were very careful he didn't do any property damage and didn't actually hit anybody.
Sure.
So, like,
he broke all kinds of traffic laws. All kinds.
Yeah. But, like, you don't get arrested for violating them. Like, you know.
You can. Certainly.
You can, but the cops have a lot of discretion about, you know, whether they do or don't. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're, like, surprisingly cool. And then if you've got some kind of weird activist with a camera on you screaming about how you're pulling over, like, a renowned civil rights attorney, and you're like, well, what do we have this guy on? And, like, let's just give him a warning and get on his way. I don't know. Like I said, it's one of those things where, like, I guess I can see my way to, like, agreeing with it, but I wish the show didn't ask me to do so much work. This whole car thing was the one fiasco of an otherwise pretty clean episode.
Yeah, I agree. But it's gonna, like, sort of pay off later when she reveals who she actually is.
Yeah.
Do they ever say her name? Because I just writing her as photographer and then later Romulan.
I got her as conspiracy loon.
Okay, that's fair.
I did like in the moment the idea, because usually when they go back in time, they always cotton to, like, a real civil rights leader or a whale researcher or someone who's otherwise got everything they need to kind of, like, navigate the situation and, like, solve the mystery. Like, they have, like, the first person they meet is, like, gifted by the writers to help them succeed. Mm-hmm. And they started with that, but then it's like, as she kept on talking, I'm like, oh, this person is an internet, like, hasn't touched grass in 10 years, has been living on the internet and is obsessed with UFOs and conspiracy theories. This is actually kind of funny that, you know, she might be able to help them to some extent, but, like, she's going to be useless in a lot of areas. And then the more she kept talking, like, I kind of think it's a cool idea that what is holding back humanity is not our own bloodlust and greed, but it's Romulans. Like, every time we got a human leader that tries to, like, inspire us, he gets killed. Or anytime we have a technology that might do away with global warming, it explodes and poisons a continent. And, like, they're just fucking with us. They're just fucking with us.
It'd be nice if we could blame everything on Romulans.
It would be. It would be nice if it wasn't just our own bullshit. But I don't know. It's kind of a clever idea. I like it.
Okay. I like how they turn it around. Once we figure out that she's a Romulan, then a lot of this stuff starts to lock into place and make a little more sense. Especially the stuff that she'll show them in the pictures later with the Romulan warbird, right?
That's so cool. It's like a literal old series style Romulan warbird.
And I thought it was kind of clever that they did that. Even in the moment when I saw the warbird, I was like, oh, because Romulans might be flying around,
sure,
you know, like exploratorily. Sort of like the Vulcans did in the time, and then they bring it back in a completely different way, and I thought it was pretty smartly written. But
I did too.
Boy, some of this stuff is not perfect. Anyway, yeah, she explains all these conspiracy theories to them and invites them to go eat. Find the seams in the bunny suit. I guess this is Star Trek's, I don't know, common shared conspiracy language that they're kind of inventing here.
What was the bunny? Yeah, what was the seams in the bunny suit?
The seams in the bunny suit represent, like, I guess the bunny suit represents the international cabal, right? Like the thing, like, hiding the international cabal. So you're like, by picking at these threads, you're finding the seams, right? And you're going to unmask them or whatever, unbunny suit them. I don't know. It was clear that it was like crazy conspiracy theory language.
Gotcha.
So they're eating, and the photographer is showing them pictures, which include a Romulan warbird and a guy waiting for the bomb to go off before the explosion. And then they part ways, and Kirk tells Lon that there was a Romulan attack on an experimental cold fusion reactor in his timeline that destroys Toronto. And he's just now remembering that. Like, Toronto gets blown up, and he's just now, I guess, look, it's 100 and something years before. So now they need to find the reactor and stop the attack, and Lon might know someone in Vermont that can help them. Here's what's killing me about this scene. Kirk is surprised that poutine has gravy in it. What kind of terrible poutine has Kirk been eating in the 22nd century?
Shit, man. Canada might have been destroyed since 2163. Like, is poutine a lost human art?
Apparently, yeah. If they took the gravy out, that's not art.
Like
that's
Roman
bullshit.
Concrete.
That's toilet soup, man.
We've lost the ability to make high quality Ontario style poutine.
Sad.
And oh my god, the loss to the maple syrup industry. Khan's got a lot to answer for.
Is there? Let's move over to Vermont, I guess. Where they visit
terrible Hallmark Christmas movie budget transition.
I thought they took a taxi all the way from Toronto to Vermont, and I was like, "Wait
they
a
talked
sec."
about how they kind of lampshade that a bit. Like, we had to evade 2 border crossings, 3 buses, and 5. It was an ordeal to get here, which it should have been. No,
I was just thinking how expensive the taxi bill would have been. He would have had to play chess in the park for days to get that kind of cash.
Yeah, or maybe do they stop and re-up? They just go to a major metropolitan area, find where the chess hustlers hang out, and fleece them?
Yeah, Toronto, apparently. So they travel to Vermont, where they visit Pelia, and they explain that they know who she is, and they ask for her help to save the future. It turns out she's not an engineer yet. If she ever was, I don't know if she's actually an engineer in the future. So she might be just a con artist.
I mean, that's a hell of a con artist to teach antimatter reactor classes at the Federation Academy, at Starfleet Academy. Like, that is some catch me if you can, Leo.
Those who can do, those who can't teach
stuff.
I'm telling you, she might not know anything about engineering.
Well, we'll find out in the fullness of time. I like to think that this was like one of those paradoxes where she was inspired to study engineering by this encounter with La'an.
Yeah, that's what I assume.
I like that idea.
She does have some watches that light up in the presence of tritium, which is a byproduct of this cold fusion reactor.
I don't know if the science of all this checks out, but it was just plausible enough that I'm like, sure. Yeah, the tritium it stops glowing because it no longer has half-life's away, but it's the phosphor. The phosphor in the dial remains, so if it was exposed to tritium, then... But, like, on the other hand, how much fucking tritium is coming out of this secret fusion reactor?
You got a leak. You got a reactor leak.
Like, isn't tritium, like, hideously radioactive, or no?
I don't know. I mean, people were apparently wearing it on their wrists in the 80s, so...
People did a lot of crazy shit. People used to take x-rays of their faces for fun. and had glass made out of uranium because it glowed and it was a real cool party trick. And then their teeth and hair started falling out. Like, it doesn't mean it's right. Yeah.
I love that she's collecting these artifacts and that one of them is like 80s watches.
Yeah. She's just a pack rat.
Yeah, So does she collect these things like in their era, or does she go back and collect things that are just valuable, that have become valuable?
My take on it was she's kind of like the Highlander, where she has just through her life amassed this collection of artifacts and antiques and whatnot that, you know, just become valuable. Almost anything. If you could, you know, you go find someone's, I don't know, fucking silver mirror from the 17th century and you brought it back in time and it was in pristine condition, it would be worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Almost anything would. Coins, money, stamps, weapons. It's like her self-explanation of it is, this is kind of like my policy in case shit goes wrong and you try to like go through thousands of years avoiding human detection and trying to avoid civilizational epoch enders and not be a pack rat. I thought it made a lot of sense. And I thought it was a cool idea as soon as she said Vermont, that like, oh, they're going to go back and Pella and she's going to like 21st century engineer some solution to this thing. I thought that was a cool idea, but when they show up and she has no idea what the hell they're talking about, in fact, is it kind of aggressively anti-science and STEM and math, I thought that was an even better, you know, again, kudos to the writer's room. They came up with some really interesting subversions of fairly standard time travel Star Trek tropes in this episode, mostly successfully.
Yeah, that was a great twist. The archaeology department just being a antique store, essentially.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, I like all that stuff.
And I also wondered, how far could you get if you went up to any average stranger and you knew their name and you said, look, you need to come here with me, Jim, because I know who you are and I know your secret. Like, is that like the skeleton key? If you know someone's name and you can just look dead serious and say, and I know your dark secret. Enough people have things that they would consider dark secrets that they would just like, you know, and go along with a little bit until they figure out who the fuck you are.
Maybe trust but verify also. Like, what is my dark secret? All right, tell me.
Right.
If you know it,
say in front of,
shouldn't be a problem.
This guy? Really?
Yeah, let's go in this other room. We'll talk about my dark secret so I can trust you, and then we'll get on with our business.
And I kind of like Pella's kind of like, I don't know if having brain melting secrets is a good way to establish a cooperative relationship, but I also had the idea that like she probably had 3 different ways to kill these people if she really thought they were seriously onto her.
Possibly. Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe you also see that 2000, because we had a lot of questions about these lanthanides, and they answered a lot of it. They've been around for multiple thousands of years, at least since Pythagoras. So if we can believe the take her at her word, that's like pretty next level shit.
Yeah. Lon and Kirk wander around Toronto looking for tritium while they chat and bond. And eventually all that chatting and bonding ends in Kirk kissing Lon, but their moment is interrupted by the tritium alarm.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, we kind of talked around this scene. I liked it. I thought it felt kind of like it didn't feel forced. It felt pretty natural. It helps that the guy that got playing Kirk is pretty charismatic, it turns out. And like, yeah, everything we know about Lon that we've discovered this episode, you know, like this all kind of tracks and makes sense. And I think despite the fact that she's almost 40 in real life, all these Enterprise junior officers felt like they play young. Like, I feel like they're supposed to be in their mid-20s. And like this stuff all kind of felt pretty realistic.
Yeah, I think so. And I thought that they were both sort of like being marooned here together. I thought added something on Kirk's side of it too. like, yeah, Kirk's a horn dog, right? You kind of
Sure.
don't need a huge excuse for him.
Just needs a pulse.
Yeah, I don't know, to hook up with her. But also, I think he's feeling a little bit lonely too. Like, they're stuck in this place together where they're the only ones who can do this mission, the only ones they can trust.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
I like how
Anyway,
he fucks around with her sense of him being an idiot too. You know, like Kirk might not. Yeah, because Kirk is a meathead, but he's your stereotypical Renaissance man Federation captain. He knows about Shakespeare. He knows about the Old Testament. He's studied things, right? And she's like this. Although I do wonder, like, maybe you study Shakespeare, but do you really study Nathaniel Hawthorne?
I don't know. Where do you end? Because there've got to be so many other extremely famous authors, right? It's like
Do people
that
from other
knowledge is kind of a two.
Do you know what I
What's
mean?
that?
Like I just wonder, like, do people in other countries study Nathaniel Hawthorne? Because I always thought that was like a quintessential American novel because it's so of a time and place. But like, yeah, would that be something required reading in Starfleet Academy?
I don't know. That's the thing. That is kind of a double-edged sword with the idea that, like, yeah, we are smarter because we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're learning things sooner and faster. Knowledge is power, that kind of thing. But there's also a glut of knowledge, right? There's so much out there. In 100 and something more years, how much more will there be? There's more being created every day now than there was in a century, 1,000 years ago. So at some point, your brain can't take it all in, and you just don't have time to view everything. So what gets lost? And what apparently, modern 2000s music gets lost entirely. If it's not from
Who Let the Dogs
hundreds
Out?
of years ago.
No
Who
one.
Let the Dogs Out?
The
That's
eugenics
studied
war wiped
at the
all
Academy.
memory of that. Yeah.
No, that one's preserved as a time capsule. Where it's so that they never repeat the mistakes of yesteryear.
Is Bohemian Rhapsody known to? We know
I would
Beastie
hope
Boys
so.
was preserved into the 23rd century, but where's the dividing line?
I don't know. But yeah, you would think, like, at some point you just couldn't take it all in because there's too much of it. But he knows it. So they go to a facility which turns out to be a Noonien Singh facility. So it just kind of opens up for Lon, who has genetic markers apparently. But the photographer shows up with a gun, revealing that she's a time-traveling Romulan, and she shoots Kirk, which sets off alarms. Kirk dies, and the Romulan grabs Lon, forcing her into the facility.
I thought it was really funny to see Jim Kirk called on a bluff, because like that is his plan A, B, and C is usually bluff, double down on the bluff, try a completely different bluff. And like within 10 seconds of the bluff, he has a giant bullet hole in his heart and he's dying.
And then he's dead 10 seconds later. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not even a bluff. Like, all the things he says will happen.
It is true.
But
yeah,
he just doesn't think that someone will be ballsy enough to call him on it.
Yeah, that there's a Romulan has been stuck on this planet since pre-grunge era, and she's just over everyone's shit.
Apparently, yeah.
I and like on my first watch, I'm like, man, my first watch of this episode, I came away thinking, boy, there's a lot of coincidences that this thing, kind of relied on. But second watch, it's like, okay, really? She's going to have genetic markers. They're going to let her get in because she's an ancestor of Khan. And like, I don't know if I buy that. But like the time travel lady makes a point at the end that it wasn't a chance that the time officer appeared to her. Like, they know all these things about the past. They know, like, they have a database, apparently can search and sift through all kinds of like personnel records and information to find that there is a particular person who's uniquely suited to do this mission. And having that genetic marker is one of those things that made, so it's like, it kind of made sense because it wasn't a random happenstance that this guy, like you think in the first episode, like, oh, he just appears and the first person he appears to, he grabs and gives this mission. No, she was selected.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of retconning, not retconning, but like enlightening. Further context you get as this episode goes. That's one. Like I said, the Romulan being a Romulan is one that makes everything like click into place and go, okay, this is making sense. And it's really smartly written.
I said this on Picard when they were doing a good job of this too. There's a couple things in Star Trek that needed to be probably retconned, like the discrepancies between when the eugenics war and World War III were said to happen versus them actually happened. The fact that our time, it seems like we were a lot bigger into the space exploration and a lot sooner in Star Trek's. Why the discrepancy? And for them to come in and essentially say it's a Romulan plot. And that has like everything's going to happen. It's going to take a little bit longer to do it. I think it's kind of it's a great idea, and they're going to have to do it again in like 20-30 years when Canada doesn't explode with a fusion reactor or whatever. But it's cool. I like that they're rolling up their sleeves and they're trying to do some smart retcons here.
So instead of going to the reactor, they go to the genetics lab where Khan is. And the Romulan wants to kill Khan because the computer told her that it would result in the Federation never forming. And Lon refuses to open the door to the lab even after the Romulan appeals to her feelings of isolation. So they fight. And the Romulan manages to get the door open, but Lon shoots her. Before she dies, she disintegrates herself. I couldn't tell if this was disintegration or if she is like time traveling back to go give this another shot.
It looked like she triggered something on her ear that spontaneously combusted her.
Okay. But this is the cyanide capsule in the tooth of Romulan civilization, I suppose.
Yeah. But it also could be since like when she completes her mission, she kind of dissolves in golden light. Like maybe that's just you could be right that this is the...
That's what I was wondering.
And if this, I wouldn't mind seeing this Romulan show up as an antagonist in future seasons, like recurring, like minor villains. That's a big fun part of Star Trek history. I could see it. Like, oh no, you thought she did, but that's just the Romulan time retrieval mechanism, and she went back and their advanced science saved her life.
It's possible. It's hard to tell with all the new effects because there's nothing I can recognize as like, oh, that's when the Romulans disintegrate themselves or something.
And they also introduced this concept where this Romulan officer is ranting and raving about how often that she's tried to like subvert the timeline, but that it's almost like the timeline itself fights back or pushes back this, idea of the fact that like time is kind of fixed and you can't really fuck with it. Like it's always going to find a way to bend back into its original.
Yeah.
Its original form. I thought that was kind of cool. And the idea that she's been trying to kill Khan since 1992, but because their efforts get thwarted, it just keeps getting delayed. I actually thought it was kind of an interesting idea to have Lon, because when I see Khan, I'm like, oh, there's going to be like, are they going to like de-age Ricardo Montalban or whatever the hell his name is, the Fantasy Island guy? Are they going to digitally de-age him and he's going to be in there like 35-year-old Khan, like Star Trek, the old series era Khan, and he's just a boy?
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know if they intended to work like this, but like, like the moral problem is like, what if you went back in time to like, the 1900s and you met baby Hitler, or you met like sweet little 6-year-old Hitler? Would you kill that child to spare Europe 100 million dead? La'an did that, and she doesn't. She is choosing to plunge the Earth into a terrible war and kill hundreds of millions of people because the Federation ultimately is the better way to go.
And there's added stakes here because she personally is affected every single day by this decision.
True. Like she's putting the scarlet letter back on her. I thought it was an interesting...
Like if you were a Hitler, right? If you were a descendant of Hitler and you had that opportunity, there would be even more reason for you to want to kill Hitler.
Yeah, but it's like, you could almost make a case of like, well, if World War II hadn't happened, the League of Nations had failed, maybe the United Nations doesn't get back together, maybe Europe is still like, you know, you kill Hitler and you prevent World War II, but like what you have is a lot of smaller scale, smaller intensity conflicts that have raged in Europe for thousands of years and continue, and like the world just doesn't quite get together. Like there is a little bit of like spirit of cooperation, at least in the Western allies. Didn't really last with our Soviet friends, but like I wonder if you can make that same case as like, you know, in our times, like the world would be worse if we didn't go through World War II. Now, I'm not willing to say that because I think I go back and get a chance to kill baby Hitler. You fucking do it. You roll the dice and hope the world's better if you spare 100 billion people from death. But it's like I said, it's hard not to make that comparison.
And the difference being they have provided that fictional alternative, right?
They have. We know
so
that
you can compare and contrast the two timelines and say, well, one is clearly better.
Right. It'd be interesting to go forward into the 23rd century and see, like, okay, like how much of early 20th century history shaped the better world that we eventually get to, if we get there. But yeah, you're right. But you also have like I was wondering if her being kind to him was going to somehow subtly influence the future. But I don't know. I was reading up in Memory Alpha about Khan and like refreshing myself about the timelines, and they had this interesting paragraph about how there was lots of supermen and women, as they established that there was like, you know, there was like a series of 8, and like out of all the warlords that end up, like Khan was the most successful and the most relatively benign. That like, yes, he was the supreme ruler of a quarter of the Earth's people and surface, but also, you know, he's kind of like a Vlad the Impaler Dracula type, where it's like, you know, he had a certain uncompromising sense of justice, but also like his lands were peaceful and secure and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I wonder if they're like, because again, the one thing I'm convinced of all the brain trust in current Star Trek is they are massive Star Trek nerds. And I wonder if they're also like, it's like, was there a way that we could have Khan have an experience why is he the most benign or benevolent of all of the superhuman genetically engineered warlords? And it's like, is it because this woman was nice to him and comforted him in a moment of like fear and uncertainty and doubt?
Yeah, could be. I don't know.
It is also wild to sit there and tell like 6-year-old Hitler, hey kid, you're exactly where you need to be. Follow that shooting star, you crazy kid. Like, yeah.
I assume that the people in this photograph might be his crew.
I wondered that too.
But I was gonna go do a 1-to-1 comparison and see if they roughly line up, like hair color and gender and all that stuff. But
there are a lot of the supermen that were killed and executed. But also like he has children that are genetically superior. Like there's all kinds of like things that could have happened differently, I guess.
For sure. So we kind of talked through all the con stuff. We didn't talk about what happens at the end of that, where she presses the button and goes back to her timeline, and then she goes to the bridge just to verify that she's back in her timeline. And Pike's there. All is as it should be. She goes back to her quarters, finds an agent of temporal investigations waiting for her, and that agent thanks Lon for protecting the timeline, asks for their equipment back, and then disappears. Let's talk about the temporal investigations real quick before we get to the Kirk stuff.
This is a well-established department of the Federation. They show up at least in Deep Space Nine, right? Like, have you got to the Tribble episode yet? Because the whole framing device of that episode is like Cisco being debriefed by the Temporal Investigation Department and like, you know, how bad you fuck things up.
Yeah, totally. And they're much more adversarial in that episode than this agent is. But probably because the stakes I don't recall being as high.
Plus Cisco in this case was the James T. Kirk doing fishtails through a Central Park, where in this episode La'an is kind of the cops trying to set things right. She's unwittingly, not witting. She's doing their bidding versus fucking things up.
Yeah, and she got it right. I mean, I imagine if she didn't get it right, Yeah, I don't know. Is there a I guess if she doesn't get it right, there will be no consequences from the temporal investigations because they won't exist.
Right. And can temporal investigations keep trying? Like, does, like, if Elon fucks up, can they take and give a bracelet to somebody else? Because they mentioned that the device shields a person from temporal changes. So, like, if you would cease to exist, this device would somehow shield you from that consequence, so that, like, the investigation department can still, like, fuck, we don't exist anymore, but we still exist in this one little pocket, and we can still send the John Connor back to fight the machines, kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's messy,
exactly
time travel, and Star Trek time travel, the messiest.
Yeah.
I did think about, this would be the easiest way to manipulate a Starfleet officer, right?
Say,
like,
I'm from temporal investigations.
Yeah, like, I need you to do this thing, and you can't tell anybody because it could fuck up the timeline, but I need you to go back in time and steal this thing. Like, this was a plot point in the episode of Star Trek where Picard takes a vacation on Risa. Like, these people show up and say they're from the future, and they're trying to prevent the theft of something, but they're actually criminals trying to steal the thing in the first place. And Picard goes along with it like a dope until he realizes at the very end. But, like, holy cow, that's a really winning strategy, to show up and be like, the fate of the universe depends on it. The timeline's going to switch if you don't go back. And meanwhile, you're just nicking something for the, corrupt or fraudulent time police.
Yeah, how could you ever know? You really couldn't.
Like, you're going to take it. It's like, well, yeah, who's going to not cooperate with them?
Yeah, they need some way to be able to prove it to the people of the current timeline that they are who they say they are.
A special handshake? Like, I'm trying to think of, like, how you could demonstrate.
like a being able to tell them things that they couldn't possibly know without being from the future.
Or do the whole, like, predict the very near future. Like, you're about to get a hailing from Nurse Chapel, and she's going to ask you about the yoga class that you're supposed to take. And then, like, there's Nurse Chapel. Yeah, I guess you could. I guess time travelers do have that ability to blow people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
That just proves you're from the future. It doesn't prove that you're there.
True.
With a good motive.
Yeah. Or that you work for who you say you work for.
Could be baby Hitler traveling through time to make sure you don't kill him.
Jesus. Yep.
You don't think you can shave that fucking mustache? Change his hair color? Lose the accent? That's like, yeah, if a time driver future from the future comes and tells you to do something, you don't immediately suspect it's aged baby Hitler trying to put the timeline back. I don't know what to tell you. You're a rube. You're a fool.
Yep. So then Lon calls up Kirk to chat. Of course, he doesn't know her, but at least he was born on Earth. And she cries over having lost her preferred Kirk, mostly because what it stands for, what it signifies in her own life, right? Not necessarily because Kirk is gone, but because she's back to where she was before also. Yeah,
that, like, to me, it's like, okay, let's say that, Lieutenant Noonien Singh is in their mid-20s, and they have been a loner their whole life, probably haven't had a lot of romantic relationships. They go on this mission with this other person, and they have this, like, familiarity and this intimacy and this weight off their shoulders they never felt before. And then less than 24 hours, it's all brutally ripped away from them, murdered in front of their eyes. And you also cannot talk to anyone about it. You can't, like, see the ship's counselor. Like, that breakdown at the end felt pretty fucking real, and I felt really bad for her, because, man, what a rug pull.
It's almost like baggage has been added this episode. I don't feel like this has done anything to help her situation. It's only made it worse, because now this
is true.
She's chosen to be in that situation, A, but B, she has this added knowledge that there is another path for her. They didn't have to be like this, right?
Yeah, and it's like, I wonder in her mind if she's like, well, if I ever, maybe I do meet Kirk on a starbase, but then he hears my, he, like, processes my last name, and, like, there's, like, even if he's cool about it, there's still that friction, and to not have that friction, Yeah, I felt like I felt like they really earned that moment.
They did.
And I felt bad
Yeah.
for her.
So a well-written episode.
And it's like, also, like, where do they take this in the future? There's so many different things they could do with it.
Get those drinks. Let's find out how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And all she has of him is this watch, right? That's the one thing she took away from this that she can, I guess, display. Could she wear this 80s watch around?
I was going to ask you, does she actually wear this thing around, or is it more like, it's going to become more like, you know, Data has this holograph of Yar, and like it's in his possession, it's one thing, but like it only shows up when they want to remind you that he had this relationship with Lieutenant Yar, right? It showed up.
I think it's going to be more of that. I don't think she's going to be showing up every single time with this watch.
No, it'll be like on her nightstand, and she'll like look over to it from time to time. But like yeah, it'd be weird for her to wear it. Although, because like the thing is, if people would ask, like that's like if people would ask about it, you know, and like she's not supposed to talk about it. So like, yeah, why are you wearing a 400-year-old watch? You know,
you think Pelia would recognize it? Be like,
that's
so
that
used to be in
what
my
I think
collection.
Is really interesting is like going, because like the way I think this particular timeline and its time travel works differently depending on what episode of Star Trek you're looking at, but I think you're supposed to understand that Pella who had this experience with La'an no longer exists. Or does that track?
The timeline splits at the attack, right?
And not the bridge attack.
When Toronto blows up.
They both mentioned it. Both of them had knowledge of the bridge attack. It happened during the fusion react. So like they met before then. Maybe.
She should. I think by the rules of this time travel stuff, yeah, she should have some knowledge of that.
And I think it'd be like the way I think it would work is like retroactively, she would have always known that La'an was La'an, and she was waiting for her to catch up to it. But like, I also think the timeline changed so that the old Pella did not know until this episode happened, and now she always knows.
Oh.
Because they showed like when she hit the button, there was like a wave that propagated through the ship, like, you know, the timeline ripples are going through. So I don't know. I'm very curious to see their next interaction, if there's any kind of like knowing glance or smile, or they actually talk about it. Because even though the lady told her not to talk, like if there's one person you could talk to about it, it would probably be Pella. You know, she's like that Guinan figure that like you can always take heavy time fate questions to, because she's already lived through it, and she, you know, right?
Yeah, I would think so. We'll see what they do with that. I also want to see how much this watch is worth on eBay. Because
like in our current time, because you want to.
This is a 200-year-old watch at this point, right?
Oh, I thought you meant like right now you wanted to get a screen screen.
Oh,
accurate
no.
Replica.
I don't care about tritium
La'an watch.
Light up watches. No.
Yeah,
I just want to know if she needed money for. Let's say the paperwork to change her name or something.
True.
Could she go sell this thing on eBay?
I don't know. I think she missed capitalism. She's too late. Too late. Born too late to sell shit on eBay, but just the right time to explore the galaxy. So
they're naming trade-off. Things bought on eBay, so they know that eBay exists. It's bought on eBay, right?
Jesus. Did you make a bot on eBay joke?
Bought on eBay.
Did you just make a bot?
I did.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Someone else has been brushing up on their con history.
It's a real bad one. Anyway, that's the episode. I thought it was a good one. I hear that the next at least three are also very good. So
all right.
I'm
excited. I wasn't sure if this is the start of the, like what you said is the slate of good Star Trek episodes. I've enjoyed them all, but I thought this was a lot of fun, and surprisingly had a lot of heart at the end too.
Yeah, and everything clicked in this episode except for maybe a car chase or two.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they're all this good, I'm excited for another season.
If you'd like to send us feedback, you can do so at startrek@baldmove.com. Once again, send us email at startrek@baldmove.com if you'd like us to consider that in the weeks ahead. You can also follow everything that we do here at Twitter, twitter.com/baldmove, or baldmove.com if you want to see what we're up to We are up to a lot of stuff. We're this week going to begin our coverage of FX Hulu's The Bear season 2. It drops all in a binge model, so we'll be doing a cluster of episodes the end of this week, and then finish up the series next week. We're getting very close to Foundation. Speaking of great science fiction, great looking science fiction, Foundation season 2. I'm pretty excited about that. And Justified City Primeval. If you want more early 21st century adventures on the Canadian border, you can join us for the Raylan Givens Adventures in Detroit. So yeah, we got that coming up. And then if you'd like to support what we're doing here at Bald Move, you can always join our club at support.baldmove.com to get ad-free feeds, tons of more bonus audio and video coverage. We're actually doing Silo, a really popular, pretty awesome science fiction puzzle box on Apple TV Plus on a premium podcast, Off the Clock, as well as what are we doing? It's that plus what we've Barry. We're gonna probably talk Barry then on the next one.
Yeah, I just finished Barry.
Lots of cool premium stuff. That'll do it for this week on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. We'll see you next week for the next episode, which Jim has promised. He's heard on good authority from the Temporal Investigation Department that it's a banger. Join us back next week to see. Until then, I'm A.Ron.
And I'm Jim.
See ya.